Final hour overdrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, back up on TSN 2. Scott Mitchell later this hour on his take from the weekend. Jays dropping 2 of 3 in Seattle. 3 winnable games. You know, they got it yesterday. It got dicey there with Romano in the ninth, too. Man, was that dicey. You hit a guy with the first pitch. He got it.
Yeah.
They got out of it. It's all good.
Even the last out,
that thing was deep.
That ball's going a little too deep for comfort.
Or it was Merrifield, I think, playing left.
Yes,
but
it was.
It was.
Yeah.
Like there was some contact.
Yeah,
and it got into the shadows, and you're like, something's. I don't know about this, man.
Yeah.
But,
well, listen, it could have been a sweep, but they get one.
Yep.
It's a positive, I guess. You take it away, somewhat of a positive.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. They're winnable games. Especially that one that's going back and forth, kind of shootout-like game.
Right. Yeah, on Saturday.
Yeah.
And like Kikuchi gave him a good start on Friday night. And, you know, the Manoah, breaking down Manoah, as I said earlier, if he was pitching at the level he was last year, yesterday's start would have been an underwhelming start.
Yep.
It would be a below-average start. You know, he still gave up a couple of earned. He walked 4 guys, a couple of hard-hit balls, especially early in the game. I think he went 5 1/3. Like, that's just an okay start. That's not a great start. It's just an okay start. But based on the previous start, you're like, that's an improvement on what we saw.
There's just a little bit of swing and miss, but he's still not enough of a swing and miss guy. But even last year at his best, he wasn't that.
Yeah, he's not racking up a ton of strikeouts, but he is making you put the ball in play where his defense can make plays for him, and he can get out of jams. And listen, you'll take the win, and you'll definitely take it with Manoah on the mound. 8 days away from the trade deadline, so Scott Mitchell a little bit later this hour. We'll get into the Messi situation, get back into the Kylian Mbappé situation. 2 things we wouldn't normally do on this show, but Messi doing what he did in his first appearance on Friday night was truly incredible. And then this Kylian Mbappé story is just shocking, the amount of money that's on the table.
It's grotesque.
It's actually absurd.
Yeah.
How much money he's reportedly being offered to go play in Saudi Arabia for a club for a year, and then he can leave and do whatever the hell he wants with the rest of his life.
Yeah, just when he's there, it'll be who knows what he's obligated to be doing while he's there.
Lots of fine print.
Yes.
Right? I think we're all assuming there's a lot of fine print in terms of what will likely be an obligation for him.
Yeah.
You know, like who you're going to have to meet and greet with, who you're going to have to do media with, how much they're going to control your life. And it's like, it's crazy as it sounds. I know a lot of people will say, I'll do anything for $776 million. But this is a guy with tens of millions in the bank already, and he's got hundreds of millions coming to him regardless of where he plays.
Exactly. Yeah, he's going to make a lot of money in his career. At some point, he's going to be talked about with like Ronaldo and Messi and those guys and how much they've earned and what they've accomplished in their careers. Like that's where this guy is and where he's going. But that is a ton of money for 1 year.
Crazy amount of money. And maybe he sticks around long term and gets like billions of dollars in the future. Like maybe that is the plan. Clearly with the Saudis, I think are thinking, get one of these guys here, if not multiple guys here, make them love it and make them stay.
It also becomes
That's what they're planning on.
It could become a trivia question. Who's the quickest athlete to ever earn $1 billion?
That's probably a good. It's got to be him, wouldn't it? Like you would think, it's probably got to be him.
Who else?
Well, I saw this Front Office Sports posted this. I think Joe from the Bridge put this up on TV. For comparisons, LeBron James has made $531 million all time in NBA earnings. Now that's on the court. That's not endorsements and brand deals. $531 million as an NBA player. Patrick Mahomes has made $494. That will be through 2031 when his deal expires, $494 million. The value of the Arizona Coyotes, I don't know why that's relevant. Like, why do you have to go low and bring in Arizona State University Coyotes? It's totally unnecessary for them to do it. But they did it. The valuation is $450 million. And this guy's going to make $776 million. So, in other words, this guy could go and play in Saudi Arabia for a year, take the cash, and go buy the Arizona Coyotes and probably build a rink cash.
I actually think Front Office Sports is your burner account. There's no way they would include the Arizona Coyotes in there. This is your
Arizona.
Yeah, no disrespect to Arizona, but this is Hazy SC's burner account.
Yeah, it likely would be something I would suggest.
The only thing that would make it more convincing is if there was a shot at New Jersey in there.
That would be ideal.
No one cares what they think in New Jersey.
That would be over the top if you put something in there about, their total roster, cap situation for the next decade, include the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah.
Just to take a quick shot at them.
It's crazy, though, to see those figures.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Laid out like that.
Like, it's amazing. And I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, the whole soccer world is bracing for it because there's been reports he was leaving PSG anyway, maybe going to Madrid. I think there's a belief that he could end up playing at Madrid. So, again, either way, Kylian Mbappé is going to be fine.
Yes.
He'll be doing okay. And I have to believe this deal's probably still going to be on the table 2 or 3 years from now. That's another thing. He could say, you know what, I want to keep playing out my career. Give me 5 years and I'll come.
How does that, if you turn down the Saudis, are they like, all right, yeah, circle back? You know how you get like a circle back every once in a while, as long as you do things pretty cordially? Like, listen, it's not for me right now. Let's touch base in X amount of months or years. Right?
I don't know.
Like, how is it with them? Is it like, no, this is it, and then I
think it's tough to get a read on how the Saudis are going to operate.
Seems like they might be a little volatile.
Yeah. I haven't had the Saudis kicking tires on my services yet.
Saudi Sports Center.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing? I can go over there. I can give you something, right? I can come over. I'll do a show over there, do the equivalent of Sports Center hits or whatever. Yeah. What do you think I would be worth to the Saudi PIF? Like the whole shoot match, what they're trying to do with sports.
Depends on.
I think they'd offer me $500,000.
It's going to depend on what happens with Matthews and Nylander, I think. If you got like real hot takes on that, then
think I can get $1 million out of them?
Oh,
I got to get $1 million out of the Saudis.
Yeah.
Give me $1 million.
Sure.
Got to get $1 million.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get into the Kylian Mbappé stuff here with Chris, but also the scene on Friday night. Probably the most famous goal in MLS history immediately, right? Because that immediately the most famous, most viral goal in MLS history, probably?
In my mind, it has to be.
I would think so because of the moment, right?
Yeah.
And Messi comes in. He doesn't even start the game. He comes in. The building's going crazy. And, of course, it ends on his foot, and it was amazing. Here's Chris Whittingham of Inter Miami's radio. He does stuff with Apple TV, Meadowlark as well, and he joins us now. He was in the building on Friday night. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
We're doing well. Would you agree with us? I mean, I think you're probably somewhat biased, but is that the most famous goal in MLS history?
I think the only rival would be the goal that Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored when he arrived. But Messi's bigger and better than Zlatan is, much as Zlatan probably wouldn't want to hear that. But yeah, I think it now becomes the biggest goal in MLS history, which is kind of remarkable considering it's the first ever game in a brand new tournament that I presume many of your listeners do not know what Leagues Cup is or what the format of it is. And by the way, like it's been really fun. The rest of the action has been brilliant this weekend. But yeah, I mean, it sort of comes in this competition that is brand new that obviously MLS and Liga MX are trying to launch to the world. And here is obviously by far the biggest moment that will ever happen in it. So it was just a remarkable finish line on what was the beginning of this, right? I mean, with it actually happening, with the signing, with the unveiling, with the first training, with all this stuff, and you get to the game, and it looked like we're going to get to the end of the game without there being that moment that you can remember it by. And then he provides just the most extraordinary thing that could have happened.
I love this reaction, too, and I have been curious and a little bit skeptical, of a lot of these guys coming over to MLS late in their careers. Is it a money grab? Is it about getting in on ownership, Apple TV, all that kind of stuff? Like, this is a guy who was scoring goals at the World Cup 8 months ago and, doing what he was doing at Barca throughout his career and some of the largest, greatest, teams in European football history. I thought, though, his reaction to the goal was incredibly genuine and very telling. I'm curious, as a guy down in Miami and a guy that covers this team, were you a little bit anxious about that yourself, that, this guy's going to be fully committed and really play with the flair that he's known to play with? And if there was any anxiety, did your mind change at all based on the reaction that he had to that goal?
I actually think my mind changed a little bit before that. I actually had the chance, as part of my work with Apple TV, to be a part of the coverage for the first training session that he had. They opened it up like 15 minutes to the media. We kind of did a whole show around it because we were covering everything around Lionel Messi, as we should. And I actually, as part of that, got to sit in the cafeteria where all the players hang out because we were doing the show from the training facility, and that was kind of like the only holding area that there could be with a reasonable amount of air conditioning. And so we're sitting there, and actually Lionel Messi came up to us and shook our hands. The people that were doing the show were like, wait a second, what is happening here? He kind of comes off as a very normal guy. And the reason why I bring all that up is because I think in the aftermath of that goal, obviously he was celebrating, obviously he was jubilant, but I think in some ways we can't really relate to it because we're not as good at what we do as he is, but he is almost kind of, it was another goal for him. He's done that before. He's done that on a bigger stage, on a bigger level, but to us, obviously as American soccer viewers or as North American soccer viewers, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. But he kind of, what I've noticed about him is that he's tried to make this as normal as possible, down to having, former teammates that he's familiar with, down to integrating himself with a group of players. To me, the thing that sort of made me feel like he was most bought in was actually on a little bit more of a sour note. There's a player in the game from Miami that got hurt in the first half. It's been since revealed that it was an ACL injury. He's a young kid, 20 years of age, Ian Frey, who tore an ACL for the third time in his young career. Every year for the last 3 years, he's torn one of his ACLs. And Lionel Messi mentioned it after the game, and then in the kind of post-game celebratory locker room picture that goes out, he's holding up Ian Frey's jersey. This is a 20-year-old kid that presumably he only just met a week ago, doesn't know very well, but it shows to me that he's integrating himself into the team and cares about being a part of Inter Miami as a football team, not as a marketing exercise or as, something that's different than what's come before. He's just a part of this team. And so I think he is as invested as anyone could hope he would be. And I think that would suggest to me that he's just going to turn in performances week in, week out, and genuinely cares about turning this club around from their current position in MLS and obviously getting on a good run here in this Leagues Cup tournament.
Well, how far do you think Leo Messi can take the MLS? Because obviously when he comes over, they have aspirations of growing the brand, growing the league. When you look at the United States, you have the NFL, you have the NBA, you're going to have MLB. I would say that MLS is probably neck and neck with the NHL as far as viewership and popularity. Like, how much room is there for this thing to actually grow with him leading the charge?
I mean, there's always huge room to grow. I just sort of wonder with this, how is someone going to, on a Tuesday night, for instance, tomorrow night they play Atlanta United. You can sit down, you look at your television options for the evening. How many people are actually going to turn on the game, as it were, actually click on MLS Season Pass and turn on Inter Miami and Atlanta United on a Tuesday night? And that really is the big question, because honestly, that's the biggest step forward for this league to take. If you look at when David Beckham arrived in 2007, there were 12 teams in the league. There are now 29. There were, 4 or 5 soccer-specific stadiums. There's now 23, 24. We've seen an enormous growth in the league, including with Toronto FC and with the Canadian clubs as well. You've seen the growth of this league become to a point where now I don't think the worry anymore is, will it survive? Which, by the way, was always a pertinent doubt because so many soccer leagues had come before it and didn't stick around, didn't survive. That really was the first goal of MLS, was survive. And now that you've gotten to the point where that's no longer a doubt, I think the next goal is relevance. And so each moment provides another chance at relevance, another moment where someone's going to turn on the TV, someone is going to buy a ticket to a game because they want to go see this guy. And you look at, the ticket prices for all the away games have gone way up, and obviously the interest in Miami has gone way up. I think certainly locally there's a huge amount of attention being captured right now in a slow time in the American sports calendar. People are watching this team, but the curiosity is always, will they stick around? Will they watch other games? And will it become a regular part of their television sporting diet? That's the next big step for MLS to take, is people watching this sport on TV, caring about the results, caring about team building, caring about it the way that you guys would probably break down the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? Yeah. That kind of discussion happening around your local MLS team, that's the kind of next relevant step for the league to take. And obviously, you have no greater tool for it than the biggest star in the history of the sport.
With Chris Whittingham of Inter Miami radio play-by-play, Apple TV, MLS commentator on Messi, his debut on Friday night. I've heard people suggest this. I've read people suggest this. I might argue this, that Messi at this point is bigger than MLS. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. Like everything you just said, Chris, it's about the league mattering. It's about fans embracing it. I don't think you can have that existence if there's a player that is bigger than the rest of the league combined. Where do you stand on that?
I understand what you're saying. I think MLS, it's possible for something to be bigger than it because ultimately there aren't other North American sports leagues where the global perspective on it is so small, right? Like if you look at, the NFL, the NHL, I mean, obviously the NHL has plenty of global relevance in, markets where players come from, but there is nothing quite like soccer in terms of MLS is just part of this huge ecosystem that lives around the world. Every continent has soccer leagues that they care about their own thing, right? So Lionel Messi touching that all over the world just by it inherently makes that bigger. Major League Soccer is only really kind of dipping into being a really global product because of MLS Season Pass now. They had TV deals all over the world. They're on Sky in the UK and in beIN Sports in the Middle East and all that stuff. But ultimately, Apple is the first entity that's attempting to push them to be global. And so I do think that it's possible. And it's a good thing for MLS that now Lionel Messi is kind of carrying them forward. And I don't necessarily think that they have to be ashamed of the fact that Lionel Messi is bigger. This is the biggest sports star in the world. Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain and Argentina are relevant the world over. And Major League Soccer is still just getting to that point. And so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I do think that if you're looking forward now, Major League Soccer is going to have to become sort of that level of relevant within the local markets that they are in, right? San Diego will be the 30th, but there's cities all over the country where you would hope that Messi can kind of drive a level of coverage, or the league can kind of push itself forward to where now that level of coverage, that level of scrutiny really comes from all 30 markets where you're breaking down. I mean, obviously Toronto FC are in a place right now where I think if it were the Toronto Maple Leafs, they would get all kinds of scrutiny for some of the mistakes that they've made and the results that they've had, considering the amount of money that they've spent. But I just don't think that the league is in that place yet. But ultimately, Messi is here to help push that forward somewhat. I think it's a lot to ask of one person to do that by himself. But everything that happens with soccer in North America is gradual. There's steps. There are abilities to take that next level forward. And ultimately, I think that you have to figure out ways to use Messi to make those happen.
Well, and I guess the Saudis are thinking, in a similar line of thinking when it comes to, the amount of money they're willing to splash around and the big names they're trying to acquire. And we already know Ronaldo's there. And obviously you've seen these reports that are coming out that Kylian Mbappé has been offered $776 million to play one season for a club team in Saudi Arabia. And I won't ask you if you think he'll do it, because at this point I'm not sure anyone knows that, even Mbappé included. But if he does, what might that do in terms of the shift of soccer around the world?
Well, it's already sort of happening, and this has happened before when China did a similar effort with the Chinese Super League, and there were a lot of big European clubs that were kind of taking advantage of it and selling players for exorbitant transfer fees, but ultimately the Chinese didn't do that anymore. But this is an interesting one because we've seen with Live Golf and we've seen with other ventures that the Saudis have gone on that they have that limitless well of money where they're going to keep going. But ultimately, the thing that I find really interesting about the Saudis' kind of public push towards sports is that I don't think necessarily they've gone about it, other than buying Newcastle United in the Premier League. They haven't gone about really bringing about forcing people to choose their thing, right? I ultimately think on a Saturday morning, soccer fans are going to wake up and choose the Premier League. They're going to choose La Liga. They're going to choose the Bundesliga. I just can't imagine, even with all the star power, that people are going to wake up on a Saturday morning and flip on the Saudi Pro League. I just don't think so. Even with Mbappe, with all the headlines that they've generated, they have the current Ballon d'Or winner and Karim Benzema joining the league. And I just don't think that people are going to tune it on because it's not a regular part of their lives, right? The Premier League has become, for soccer fans, a regular part of, in North American terms, a morning ritual. And I just think that I can't see the Saudi league doing that. This Mbappe thing is, I think you can't ignore, for me, the geopolitics in it, just because Saudi Arabia and Qatar do not have the best of relationships, and the Qatar sports investment own Paris Saint-Germain, and so you kind of almost wonder if that offer is almost like an FU offer, like daring PSG to accept it, and then putting Mbappe in this position. And oddly enough, it seems like PSG and the Qataris have, like, yes, we will take your hundreds of millions of dollars and kind of put you in a position to wire us money. But I sort of wonder what the ultimate end goal of it is. I just can't foresee, as with Live Golf, there being a world in which people turn on the Saudi Pro League every morning.
No, I'm with you on that. Great stuff, Chris. Really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You got it. Chris Whittingham of Inter Miami Radio, play-by-play, and Apple TV MLS commentator. Differences with the Messi stuff and MLS is this is in our world, and I think MLS only really cares about the North American scene. Obviously, it'll be great, and Apple would love for people around the world to jump on board. The thing is with the Saudis, like they're trying to make noise around the world. It doesn't seem like they're doing it for their own people. They're doing it so the rest of the world start paying attention to them.
Right.
Because what Chris said is what I've been echoing, really since the Messi news came down. I don't believe for a second people in Europe are going to be watching Messi play over here because they don't care about Inter Miami and they don't care about MLS.
Got the best soccer in the world right in their backyard.
Exactly. Like, and that was what was driving my point about like Messi being bigger than the game. As great as he was never bigger than La Liga. He wasn't bigger than the El Clasico. He wasn't bigger than Barca. He was just the greatest player on that team. But here it's a different beast. But in North America, if you're MLS, all you care about is Americans and people in Miami and Canadians jumping on board.
You need something.
And maybe Mexicans jumping on board.
You need some kind of jumping off point that gets people watching your program. Like it was Beckham, it was Ibrahimovic, now it's Messi. This is the biggest one of all time. He has that big moment. Like now's the time if they're going to capitalize on it. But to Chris's point, it's like the local markets for the local teams also need to drive.
They have to drive it,
right? So
yes.
You got 29 teams. You're going to have 30 coming in. Like locally, can those 30 teams become relevant? Are people going to tune in on a Tuesday night? Like that's the bigger challenge because that moment comes and goes. That's great. Like how are you going to really drive this forward now? The other thing about the Saudi situation, and where does betting fall into play? Because people want to bet on the Champions League. They want to bet on Serie A, all these things, right? Who's betting on Saudi soccer? You don't know the teams. You don't know the play. You know one guy there.
Yeah.
Like betting draws a lot of interest when it comes to sports.
Yes.
And it's big in
and
soccer.
It's massive.
Massive on a worldwide
Massive.
scale. No one's betting on Saudi soccer unless you are in the know and you know something. I don't know.
I think it might scare the books because of the unknown. Right? The fact that you're dealing with like a league that is regulated clearly, but you're dealing with such a variety of talent and unknown. Like someone's got to be a capper for that. Like someone's got to place a line on those games.
What's going on there?
And if someone does, that's how books lose money. Right? Like there was a great book written. I don't remember the name of it. I read it like over 20 years ago. All these different stories about like professional gamblers. And I guess the original way to make big money was on obscure college basketball because the handicap system, they knew how to cap a game featuring Duke or Carolina, Michigan State. But if you found like a game that had a line for two teams that no one's heard of before, they just didn't have the information to put the line up.
Right.
And that's where like the pros would go to work and find out how to work that number, and guys would be making a fortune off playing, Southeastern Louisiana State versus Gary's College.
So obscure, and I get how that would scare the books.
Yeah,
but it's still not bringing the masses. It's not bringing like I don't know Johnny Gambler on his couch on a Saturday morning that just wants a little action just to entertain himself.
No, it's correct. Like. I don't know. I don't know what Mbappé is going to do. I mean, we'll see what happens here, but it's just an absurd amount of money. Absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we'll get back into Ilya Samsonov getting his number settled. $3.55 million. It's a good amount of cash. It's a great amount of cash.
He made 1.8 last year.
Right. He basically doubled the
man.
amount of money he was making. So something to chew on brought to you by Boston Pizza coming up. Scott Mitchell coming up as well. Jays Dodgers tonight in LA. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right. Something to chew on is brought to you by Boston Pizza. This summer, whether you're in Moose Jaw or Moncton, there's a BP patio near you. Join us for a long lunch or a late night and see you for a pint on the patio soon. We're asking people online earlier how Leaf fans are feeling now about this goalie situation in Toronto. Now that you've got a number set, Ilya Samsonov, $3.55 million per. Joseph Wall will make a little under $800,000. You got two goalies. at under $4.5 million per. I think the cap hit is astonishingly low when you think about it. I feel good about the Samsonov situation on a one-year deal. I didn't need long-term deal with him. $3.55 million, I think, makes a lot of sense. Joseph Woll, I'm not so sure about yet. I got to be honest. I'm curious. I'm pulling for him. I'm pulling for the story. I've been ranting and raving about this for years, how this organization cannot draft and develop their own goalie. They haven't done it in basically 30 years. Josh Reimer being a recent exception, but they weren't very good at that point, and then he moved on, but they felt they needed to upgrade him. So I'm rooting for the Joseph Woll story. But until he proves it, at this point, it's a Garrett Sparks situation.
Yeah.
Done everything you possibly can in the American Hockey League. When he stepped in for Samsonov in the playoffs, I thought he looked great. Like, he won them Game 4. He played really well. Game 5, that's a tough spot in overtime. And I thought he played well. And I know he had a really good American Hockey League season. And he's over-ripened and they're ready to go. But at this point, it's kind of maybe a mediocre pairing. Like, that's what it is. It's a middle-of-the-pack goaltending duo.
The good news is that can change very early into the season. I know some goalie guys that seem very high on Joseph Woll, but the thing is he's played 11 NHL games. So you have to take that at face value, and he's inexperienced. But with that being said, like, if goalie guys are telling you, hey, he's very technically sound, I like the way he plays, that's better than them saying, I'm not sure about the guy, and I think he's going to struggle. So I think we can take that and kind of run with that a little bit. But to have both your goaltenders under $5 million, and perhaps, like, we'll see when the season gets rolling, but perhaps it's going to be a pretty good tandem with a guy who continues where he left off from last year in Samsonov. You get a young kid who's up and coming, knocking on the door to hopefully be like your franchise starter. I feel optimistic about it. I do. And I think the 1 year for Samsonov is excellent for the Leafs because it puts him right back in that situation where he was last year, highly motivated to prove himself, which he's going to have to do again because he's going to be UFA. And if he stinks it up, he's right back down to 1 point whatever million,
right?
Whoever's going to give you that opportunity. You want to make what Saros and Ottinger make? Go get it, man. 1 year, go prove it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a perfect opportunity for him. I'm sure he's not ecstatic about where the arbitrator came back, but he probably knew it was going to meet in the middle. That's what it was. He asked for 4.9, the Leafs 2.4, it's 3.55. That's very fair. That's very reasonable. And he's a young guy who still, his reputation is largely based on talent and being a first-round pick. He had a good year last year, really good regular season, really good at home. And he was better than Vasilevsky in the first round. Like, that's probably the way to define it. It's not like he was. He was.
Not outlandish.
That's not a shot.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is Vasilevsky was poor, and Samsonov was good, but he wasn't great. Like, he had a sub-9 save percentage in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, he was not stand on your head the reason they got over the top. But when he locked in, he locked in. And when he had to, right? Game 3 in particular, right? It was 3-2, I think, going into the second period, maybe third period. He stood on his head, allowed Ryan O'Reilly to tie it late. Morgan Riley scores it late in that first overtime. Boom, the rest is history. That was a big moment for him. But he's still in the prove-it part of his career. And if you're going to be in that position, you want to do it on a really good team.
Yeah.
And clearly he's comfortable with playing in Toronto, too. He's been through the fire already this season. He knows what it's all about.
He handles the media well. I think his whole mindset and attitude is really good. And even going back to the playoffs, he gutted it out. Like, he was banged up in that playoffs, and he gutted it out. Like, I think there's just a lot of competitiveness from that guy, which I think bodes well for him, and that's why I like the 1 year deal for him. Like, he obviously sees the goaltenders who are making more money than him, who have inferior numbers, and he's got to look at that and say, all right, I'm going to show you guys 1 year here, and then you're probably not going to be able to afford me.
I'll go get it.
And then, but his thing is, he better stay healthy for his own sake, because Joseph Woll, if that guy, takes the ball and runs with it, it's going to be his net.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are very optimistic about his game.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, it projects Samsonov, 70-30 type of starts.
He's got to play 50-plus games.
Yeah. Well, he needs to prove he can be a true number one.
42 games last year. He's got to get into the 50s and healthy.
But if Woll, what that means for the Leafs and Sheldon Keefe in particular is if Woll plays better than him, you're not beholden
No.
Samsonov. Samsonov is not Vasilevsky. If he has a bad 10 games, he's still going in the 11th time. Wall can come in and steal games.
Yeah.
He should be looking at it that way. Jays, Dodgers tonight in L.A. The Jays dropping 2 of 3 in Seattle over the weekend. Here's Scott Mitchell, our Jays reporter. How do you look back on that weekend in Seattle, Scotty, from a Blue Jay perspective?
I think they don't want to play Seattle. I think bad things happen when they seem to play that team. I just look. I mean, we all know about the Rays in the division, but that's the team that's kind of got you out west. And whether it's regular season, you come back last June, you get your manager fired out there, and then we all know what happened in October. And yeah, I mean, look, I think I look at this playoff race, and I just think, the Mariners aren't going away. We'll see what the Angels do with Ohtani over these next couple of weeks, or this next week, I guess. You just watch those games and kind of watch Romano kind of walk a tightrope a little bit, and a lot of things happen late, and, you realize that's a good team, and, the Jays are a team that likes to do things the hard way a little bit. I think obviously Manoa's start yesterday, just having him kind of have a little bit better one where he's not getting yanked early, I think that, bodes well. And, I think the big thing is with Rio on his way back, what does the rotation look like? What do they do? Tough stretch coming up. So, interesting stretch for this team right now.
Well, and what's the feeling around the team right now? Like where they are in the standings, they're 2 games up on the Red Sox when it comes to the final wild card position. It almost just seems like they're going to be in that spot, and that's where they're going to end up. And it's like, okay, now get in that wild card position and try and make some noise. But like, is there more? Can they achieve more? Are they in danger of falling out? It just seems like that's where they are, and that's where they're going to be.
Yeah, look, I mean, the first part of your question there, the way this team feels, they feel great coming out of the All-Star break. They feel like, their best baseball is ahead of them, and, it's kind of hard to, kind of feel any other way unless, you've kind of been frustrated watching this team. But look, they've been a second half club for the last 2 years. I can't remember what it was exactly, but they've been playing close to 700 ball, 2021, 2022. September on. So they've played some great baseball in the second half, and obviously it's mostly the same guys. And when you factor in, and again, this is how you look at it, is Vladdy just is what he is now and kind of having a down year and it's not going to change? Or, are some of these guys due, like we talked about last time, with Hayes, are they due for hot streaks? Is Springer due for a hot streak? You've seen kind of Kirk come out of it over these last couple of days. That's a really good sign. It just depends on kind of how you view this team. But, I think they feel like they've got their best baseball ahead of them in August and September. And, when you look at kind of how the division race has tightened up, they're still looking at that. But if you're not looking at that, you're definitely looking at that top wildcard spot.
Well, this 6-man rotation that appears inevitable with Hyunjin Ryu continuing to make rehab starts and likely rejoining the team at some point. Of the 6 arms, if you were to ask Ross Atkins and he were to give you a 100% candid, honest answer, how many of those 6 arms do you think he'll be able to trust, or he feels he can trust over the next month and a half?
Yeah, look, I think it's, for sure 3. Yeah. If you're getting an honest answer out of them, I think you have to kind of feel good about the way Kikuchi's pitched, but just with his track record over his career, and he can look, like he's going to throw a no-hitter every 5th day for a couple starts and then go out and really blow up. So I think he's in that conversation at 4, and then 5, 6. Manoah right now you can't trust because, even with Sunday's start, some of the underlying metrics, things like that, the walks, the command, it's still not there. And I don't know that it's coming back. And I don't think the Blue Jays think they're ever going to get, not ever. I don't think they're going to get the 2022 Manoah this season. And then with Ryu, look, I think, the history of these guys coming off TJ, 14 months out. He's a veteran guy. There's no reason to kind of save any bullets with him. He's going to go out and give you his 90, 95 pitches. I think he can be a real good back-end starter, but trust, no at this point until you see him do it for kind of a month or 6 weeks.
Yeah. Like, that's what's wild about this situation is you're going to have 6 major league arms, all of substance, like all of name value. Like big league dudes getting paid a lot of money.
That's the thing. Like even Kikuchi makes what, 15 million?
He makes 12 or 13 this year. Ryu was making on average 20 a year. Ryu was, third in the Cy Young back in 2020. And I think they can have faith in 3 guys. I think that's where they're at, which probably speaks to them feeling, Scotty, they might have to add a 7th guy just in case. Because it very well could come down to that rotation being the difference between punching a ticket and being on the outside looking in.
Yeah, 100%. And I will say this for context. Look across baseball. There's not a lot of teams with 4 or 5 locked-in guys that they can trust. So, even look at the Houston Astros this year. They've had Lance McCullers go down. They've had some kind of issues in their rotation a little bit. So, context-wise, they're probably in a pretty good spot relative to, most teams in baseball. They even, going into LA tonight, the Dodgers have been ravaged in their rotation and, they're still hanging on. I think, when you look at it, this is why they're getting Ryu up now. He's throwing a side session, and they're going to get him a start because, you want to see what he looks like against major league competition before, August 1st. So, hey, get him up, get him a start. Hope, get him 90 pitches, 5 innings, see what he's got. You get Manoah out there again, later this week. I have trouble seeing them going out and being in on a Lucas Giolito. And I don't know that you need a guy that, at least hasn't pitched in a swingman role because you technically don't have a rotation spot open. So, it all comes back to, and, I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. I think, if you're looking at this deadline, I think it's got to come with some subtraction. So, do you include, is a Manoah in a deal, something like that? It's going to be interesting to see what they do because I think they need impact bullpen help, especially when you watch Romano. I think they need another guy back there to be a World Series caliber bullpen, and they need a right-handed bat. So, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the rotation.
Well, and the hard thing if you're going to trade someone, right? Like everyone gets hot and cold at points throughout the season, but if you're going to talk about Manoah, like you got to convince teams they're getting last year Manoah, not this year Manoah.
Yeah, you're selling him low. That's tough.
Like, and teams are going to be like, well, we kind of see what he is now. Like there's no guarantees he gets back to what he was last year. So that's a very difficult proposition if you're trying to cash in on that and get someone with some impact.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're definitely selling low, and you're definitely not, using him as a headliner at this point. He'd be a piece, and that's just kind of a hypothetical. But that's the way I envision them, improving the rotation. And you guys mentioned it. It's all big money guys, the front 4 plus Ryu. So I think this rotation is pretty good. I'm curious because even when Ross Atkins came out and spoke with the media, I guess it was about a month ago, kind of addressed the trade deadline for the first time. Rotation was the one thing he pointed out. Mm-hmm. This was with Manoah kind of scuffling and, with Ryu kind of on his way back. So, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly that's been their philosophy. That's what they invest in. They pump money and resources into the rotation. And what that means between now and next Tuesday, I guess we'll find out. But it was interesting that Teoscar was asked about returning to Toronto over the weekend, and he seemed to be pretty cool with that idea. I'm not sure how people in Seattle would react, although they should be happy considering what he did over the weekend, especially Friday and Saturday night. But, man, that Seattle team, it's tough to get a read on them, isn't it, Scotty? Like, they're game over 500. But coming into the season, they had high hopes. Like really high hopes. And if they're chasing you and the Yankees are chasing you and the Sox are chasing you and the Angels keep Ohtani, those are some big boys that are in your rear view.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a real intriguing playoff race. I still like Seattle. Look, you look at Luis Castillo, you look at George Kirby, you look at Logan Gilbert. they didn't pitch that well this weekend, but, I think that rotation is one of the best in baseball. And I think, this is the time of year where you start to see, kind of rotations, bullpens kind of stand out, in the dog days. So, I think they're going to be right there. I don't think they're selling. And, it's funny, the Teoscar experience, you kind of saw the whole thing over the weekend. You see him kind of, hit the game winner, and then you see him, botch a ball in right field. And, that's where this Blue Jays team has gotten better this year. They don't do that. They don't, give away runs like that. And they're not as good offensively. And, it's interesting. Teoscar hasn't had, the best season. He's still flashing some power and things like that. It's going to be interesting to see where his market is in the offseason because, I know one of the reasons the Blue Jays traded him is just internally their metrics didn't match up with, where he was contract-wise or anything like that. So, he would fit nicely for the second half of this season, but I think Seattle's right in that mix, if not one of the wild card favorites, I would say.
All right, Jays Dodgers tonight. Enjoy that, Scotty. We'll do it again later in the week.
All right, cheers, fellas.
Scott Mitchell, our TSN Blue Jay reporter. So, I don't know, it's tough to get a read. Like Scotty, what he's saying about the rotation, he's right. There's a reason it's a back end of the rotation. Like if you have a fifth starter, he's probably not going to have a 3 ERA. But if you have a fourth and fifth and sixth starter who you're really concerned about, and Kikuchi is not in that camp right now based on his numbers. He's still got like a 3.90 ERA.
Yeah.
He pitched well on Friday night. But he's still got a lot of games left.
Yes.
A lot of games, and this front office has always indicated they believe in a deep rotation. And that doesn't mean I'm bracing for them to bring in a stud, but I'm bracing for them to bring in someone that can start games in case they need them.
It always perplexes me when you hear teams say we believe in a deep rotation, but then they're going to work off a strict pitch count and go to the bullpen early in the game.
Right.
So why do you care so much about having such a deep rotation if you're just going to pull someone after 90 pitches and go to your bullpen?
I guess just hope you can get through 5 or 6.
Right.
I guess it's simply the numbers. We've been talking about it.
Yeah, but then that's a weird philosophy to have for me. If you should probably say, because we're going to go strict pitch count, we want a robust bullpen because we know we're going to need 4 innings out of a bullpen.
Well, listen, statistically, their bullpen's been really solid.
It has been.
Really, really good. But, the high-end teams, it's not rocket science. Like every deadline, they add to the bullpen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good your bullpen is. You can always have more arms.
You're going to need it.
And I would expect the Jays to add a couple of arms. I'd be disappointed if they didn't. I don't think they could walk in that clubhouse and explain themselves. I'm talking Ross Atkins.
Yeah.
If there's not some sort of a bolstered lineup between now and the deadline.
I agree. And then the other thing about the back end of your rotation, you got these wild card games. You don't get to your back end of your rotation if you don't get through those games.
No.
You know what I mean? Like your top 3 guys need to be cooking, or else it doesn't matter who you got in the back end.
Even if you get to a DS or a Championship Series, World Series, your fifth starter's not starting for you anyway. Now, if he's got a power pitch, he might be a bullpen arm.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be Kikuchi. It's not going to be Hyunjin Ryu.
No.
But if it's not Manoah, then what are you dealing with here at this point?
Yeah.
Jays Dodgers tonight. We'll get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. We just saw the Mariners. And you got Luis Castillo on the mound. I like them on the money line. All right? You're basically getting, you got to pay a little bit of juice on that. Money's coming in on Seattle. I understand why. But I like the Mariners. I like the way they were playing over the weekend. We just had Scotty on. I think they're a second-half team to keep an eye on. Castillo's obviously a great arm. I'm on it, and I'm on the over in the Reds-Brewers game tonight. That's a massive game in the Central in the NL. But 2 gas cans on a mound. Total's actually come down to 9. I like it. You got to pay a little juice on that, but I like the over. Reds-Brewers tonight. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth when you bet baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus and physically located in Ontario. I hit a big one. I had Tommy Fleetwood plus 20 or top 20. Put a lot of scratch on that. I felt really good about it, although he tripled 17 yesterday and started. I was like, if this guy blows up on 18, I'm going to lose what should have been a guaranteed make money situation the way he was playing all week. But we had a parlay set up on FanDuel. McElroy top 10, Fleetwood top 20, Tom Kim top 30. And the one guy that jammed us, we got greedy. I got greedy. Bob McIntyre, top 40. He made the cut and was a gas can all weekend. They all when you have a 4-guy parlay, like a placing parlay, and they all make the cut, you are ecstatic.
Oh yeah,
because it's alive.
Yeah.
McElroy top 10. Tom Kim.
He did it on a
broken ankle, basically.
A grade 1 tear.
Yeah,
his ankle.
So that parlay, but the rest of the picks, good picks.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone cashed on a Bryan Harmon.
You got any Saudi soccer coming up?
I got nothing.
No?
I got nothing.
Okay.
No. I got nothing on that. Nothing on Harmon. Nothing. All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. Back up on TV. You get grilled when you're not on TV. Like no one's writing, hey, good to see you on TV.
I got one.
It's never positive reaction.
Well,
on X.
And you know what? All my friends, my so-called friends that chirped me today about my shirt, Peter Holland, Joe Resnick, Aaron Korolnik, they're all dead to me.
They should be. Losers with horrible style. That's a great shirt.
Thank you.
All right, Frankie. Good seeing you, buddy.
You too.
There's Frankie Corrado. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
That's a nice suit, Hazy B, 4 p.m.
Thank you. I know. We'll chat then.